Good afternoon, friends. As you all know that over the past 3 decades, there have been several advances in the stent technology. From bare metal stents, we went into an era of drug-eluting stents, and in between we had also a small period of bioabsorbable or fully dissolvable drug-eluting stents. Well, in the drug-eluting stent also, there have been advances in the stent material that has been used over the past 3 decades. Starting from stainless steel stents, we moved on to cobalt chromium. Then some of the stents are also now platinum chromium. In terms of polymer, different companies have used different types of polymers to allow a better penetration of the drug which is embedded on the polymer into the vessel wall. And then the technique of coating the stent with the polymer and the drug. And this third component has not been explored to a great extent except by one company which has come out with abluminous drug-eluting stent, which is a unique stent in several ways. And in the next 20 minutes, I will tell you what are the unique features of abluminal drug-eluting stent system. I call it a stent for all seasons. Yeah. Now, coming to the abluminal drug-eluting stent system, how is this stent different compared to the conventional drug-eluting stents that we have been using it over the past almost 2 decades? There are three important features of this abluminal stent. One is that it has got a abluminal coating. Now, by abluminal coating, we mean the stent is coated with a polymer and the drug, which is a sirolimus, only on the side which comes in contact with the vessel wall. The stent is not coated on the luminal surface. That's the first thing. And this facilitates monodirectional drug release, leading to faster re-endothelization. The second unique feature of abluminal DES is a fusion coating. Now, what is a fusion coating? As you understand, or if you're not, let me make you understand that the stent is coated first with a polymer and drug and then clamped over a balloon. That's the usual conventional technology of stenting, stent coating. But this abluminous stent is coated in a different way. It is first crimped over, a bare metal stent is first coated, crimped over a balloon. And then the coating is done subsequently, thereby resulting into coating only of the abluminal surface, and not only the abluminal surface, but also parts of the balloon which is not covered by the stents. So basically it is a two-way technology where that's why it is called fusion technology, where you're coating the stent with a anti-proliferative drug, but also coating the balloon which is not covered with a stent and which is likely to come in contact with the vessel wall. So it is in fact a DES plus a drug-coated balloon. The objective of this is to facilitate homogeneous delivery of the drug to the entire length of the lesion, which addresses the issue of geographical miss and diffuse proliferative disease, particularly in diabetic patients. The third different issue or a different way in which the stent is coated is a edge coating. Now, what do we mean by the edge coating? In this case, the stent is coating for additional 0.5 millimeter on the proximal and distal edges of the stent. That means the marker which is 0.5 millimeter outside the stent, the also gets the coating so that you can avoid the occurrence of restenosis, which often takes place at the edge of the stent. Then, like other many stents which are available in the market, it is got a biodegradable polymer, and the The unique coating forms a film of biodegradable polymer and drug mixture when the stent is expanded and put against the vessel wall. This addresses the issue of uniform delivery of the drug into a larger surface area of the lesion. So there are less chances of distal microembolization and slow flow phenomena. This is how the stent looks like, and this is a complete cartoon of the stent. You can see here, first of all, its entry profile. There is a tip length which is approximately 5 millimeter. So it allows you a good penetration or easy penetration into the lesion. The entry profile of the tip is 0.41 millimeter. Then comes the distal marker, and 0.5 millimeter proximal to the distal marker is the distal edge of the stent. Similarly, there is a 0.5 millimeter gap between the proximal marker and the stent, and the coating of the stent is done from marker to marker. So from marker to marker, so that you are now coating 0.5 millimeter outside even the stent on the balloon, so that you are not liable to produce a edge restenosis. The crossing profile of the stent is very good, 0.038 of an inch or 0.98 millimeter, and coating is done on the stent and exposed parts of the balloon. So therefore, it is a unique technology in many ways. Coming to the design of the stent, it is a hybrid cell design consisting of both the open cells in the mid segment and closed cells in both the proximal and distal ends, so as to provide enough radial strength and also allow flexibility and easy access to the side branch. Then it has got opposite alignment of the connectors across the stent, and this is also to facilitate the flexibility of the stent. It has got a zero foreshortening design and unique strut design for flexibility and larger contact surface. Now let me tell you about the strut design and the connectors. Now this is made of cobalt chromium L605, and this has got a variable thickness of the struts at different points. For example, the strut thickness is 73 microns. The link has got a width of 16 microns. You can see here. This strut at the hinges is 80 microns, but in the middle part, the struts have a width of 120 microns. So all these differences in thickness of the struts at various points have been done to allow better flexibility and conformability of the stent at the same time keeping the radial strength in mind. Now the stent comes in three different cell designs. There is a 6-cell design, 8-cell design, and 10-cell design. Now in the 6-cell design, we have got the two connectors in the middle. You can see here the two connectors in the middle. One is here and one is here. Whereas there are three connectors at the extremities. At the extremities, one connector, second connector, and the third connector. So on the other extremity also there are three connectors, 1, 2, and 3. So in a 6-cell design stent, which is suitable for vessels of diameter of 2.25 and 2.5, it has got two connectors in the middle and three connectors on this side. Then we have an 8-cell design which is suitable for vessels from 2.75 to 3.5 millimeter in diameter. And it has got two connectors in the middle and 4 connectors in the sides. You can see here 1, 2, 3, and 4 connectors on the sides. Similarly, then we have got the 10-cell design which is suitable for vessels of 4 millimeter, and it has got two connectors again in the center, 1 and 2 connector, and in the middle, and 5 connectors at the extremities, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 connectors in the extremities. So this has been done to allow a appropriate flexibility of the stent and get a better access to the side branch with the help of varying the connectors based upon the cell diameter that you would like to ultimately, the stent diameter that you would like to achieve. Now, the circular cell diameter is again very good. For a 2.25 millimeter, the circular cell diameter is 0.83, and for a 4 millimeter is as big as 1 millimeter. So it provides an easy access to the side branch because of a greater cell diameter. And when the stent is fully expanded, with a fully expanded, it has got a circular diameter for side branch, which is very good. For a 2.25, it is 4 millimeter, and for a 4 millimeter stent, it is 6.7 millimeter. Now, how much you can expand a stent? For example, let's take 3 millimeter stent. A 3 millimeter stent, which is a 8 cell design, can be expanded and up to a diameter of 3.75 millimeter with a metal to artery ratio of 15 millimeter and a circular cell diameter of 0.88. A 4 millimeter stent, which is very good for the left main or a proximal LED, it is a 10 cell design cell stent with a maximum expansion up to about 5.5 millimeter. So 4 millimeter stent can be expanded up to 5.5 millimeter. So this stent, which can take care of the proximal LED if it is 4 millimeter diameter, can be expanded up to 5.5 in the left main if you are using the stent for the left main bifurcation stenosis. Metal to artery ratio is 13% and the circular cell diameter is as much as 1.06 millimeter. Now looking at the release kinetic of sirolimus, the maximum delivery of the drug takes place between the 7th day to the 48th day. You can see here from 0 to 7 day, there is a quick burst release of the drug, and then from 7 to 48 days, it continues to get released, and thereafter it reaches a plateau. So if you look at in vitro model, 50% of the drug is released in burst during the first 7 days phase, and total 70% of the drug is released in 48 days. So almost 70% of the drug is already into the vessel wall in 48 days, which ensures faster healing and facilitates faster endothelialization. Now, these are the details of the stent with technical specification. It is mounted over a RX stent delivery system. The nominal pressure is 8 bar. Burst pressure is 14 bar. Guide wire use is again similar, 0.014. It can go through a 5 French guiding catheter. Crossing profile, I've already told you, is 0.038. And entry profile, which is through the tip, is very good, 0.016. It's a highly flexible stent with excellent conformability, remarkable side branch access, zero foreshortening, and good radial strength. So far about the technicalities of sirolimus eluting abluminal DES+. Now let's see what is the clinical data. Now a few of these trials have already been completed and a few more are ongoing, and 2 of them are randomized trials with the most powerful Xience stent or a everolimus eluting stent. The first one was a ENABLE-1 study, which was a prospective single-arm, single-center study on 40 patients. And then there was a ENABLE registry, which was on 2,500 patients, which was again a prospective single-arm multicentric registry. And both these have been completed and the data is available. One can go through online or can ask the innovators of the stent. The third, which is still ongoing, is a dedicated registry, which is prospective multi-center spontaneous clinical registry, and which is a national multi-centric registry in 5,000 patients, out of which nearly 1,000 patients have already been enrolled. Now let us look at the first one. The ENABLE-1 study is a first-in-man clinical evaluation of abluminal DES plus drug-eluting stent system for assessment of safety and efficacy in the treatment of coronary artery lesions. Now this is non-randomized for clinically occurring real-world lesions. There was no exclusion or inclusion criteria. The number of patients enrolled in the study was 40. Clinical follow-up was done at 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, and will continue for 3 years. And angiographic follow-up was available in 39 out of these 40 patients at 6 months, which was the pre-designated endpoint. The primary endpoint was the instant late lumen loss at 6 months done on QCA from a core lab. And there were several clinical endpoints like MAZE at 1 year follow-up, then composite of cardiac death, target vessel revascularization, target lesion revascularization, stent thrombosis according to the HARP definition. When we look at these 40 patients clinical profile, you can see here that almost 40% of the patients, 42.5% of the patients had diabetes. So it's a good number of patients with diabetes. Almost 48% of the patients had unstable angina. And there were a lot of patients with type B2 and C lesions. Almost 60% of the patients were type B2 and C lesions. Well, the results were very gratifying. The late lumen loss within the segment, that means 5 millimeter on either side of the stent, was very low, 0.0117 plus minus 0.029, which is almost equivalent to the initial Cypher stent and most of the present generation everolimus, etc. stents. The binary restenosis, in-segment restenosis was 5.1%. When you looked at the instant late lumen loss, it was 0.024 and the binary restenosis was 5.1. Clinical follow-up, MAZE was 2.5% at 12 months. There was no stent thrombosis recorded up to 12 months of follow-up. There was one cardiac death, but still no stent thrombosis recorded or reported through 36 months of follow-up. So it's a very gratifying data with the stent. Then came the data from the ENABLE registry, which was an open post-marketing surveillance registry of abluminal DES+, which has a sirolimus as the anti-proliferative drug. And the objective of this registry was to evaluate the safety and efficacy of abluminal DES in all comers population with minimal exclusion criteria. The study design was multi-center, prospective, all comers, ongoing registry performed in 31 centers in India. The follow-up was through an ambulatory visits or telephonic contacts at 1 month, 9 months, 1 year, and yearly follow-up up to 5 years after the index procedure. Now, I'll not go into the details of the endpoints. There were primary endpoints, then there are a lot of secondary endpoints. But again, you can see here the diabetes was present in nearly 1/3 of the patients. In STEMI was the number of patients with STEMI was almost 42%. Now, when we look at the follow-up, 99.8% of these patients had completed 1 year of follow-up and almost 90% of the patients have completed 2 years of follow-up. So that highlights the meticulous follow-up which has been done in this registry. When we look at the clinical outcomes in terms of the 1 year compared to 2 years, you see that when you compare 1 year MAZE versus 2 years MAZE, there is hardly any significant difference. Thus signifying that there is no enhancement of MAZE on a follow-up beyond 1 year, although follow-up is still ongoing at 3 years, 4 years. So if you look at the other endpoints like cardiac death, myocardial infarction, TLR, TVR, and stent thrombosis, all are similar at 2 years as at 1 year. So one can conclude that it has got a powerful performance across all clinical endpoints, both at 1 year as well as at 2 years. And 2 years, the number of patients was very good. 2,500 patients at 1 year of follow-up and nearly 2,300 patients at 2 years of follow-up. Now, out of these 2,500 patients, there were almost about 860 patients who were diabetic and 1,641 patients were non-diabetic. Then the investigators looked at the performance of the stent in diabetic, both non-insulin dependent as well as insulin dependent. Now, out of these 855 patients who were diabetic, the data was compared to 1,641 patients who were non-diabetic. And against The performance was excellent in diabetics across all clinical endpoints, thus emphasizing that the stent is highly efficacious, free of any serious adverse events like stent thrombosis, even in diabetic patients. You can see here that there is no increased incidence of stent thrombosis in diabetics, which is shown by a blue bar, as compared to non-diabetics, which is shown in the orange bars. All other endpoints were also more or less similar. There was no statistical significant difference. They also looked at acute myocardial infarction patients enrolled in this registry. And out of 2,500, again, 999, nearly 1,000 patients were enrolled for acute myocardial infarction and the remaining for non-AMI. And again, in AMI, at 1 year, the data was very promising across all clinical endpoints, whether it was MACE, cardiac deaths, TVRMI, TLR, and total stent thrombosis. Except that the total stent thrombosis was slightly higher, 1% in these patients who had received the stent for acute myocardial infarction as compared to those who did not have. It was almost 3 times higher, 0.3 in non-MI versus 1% in MI patients. Then an ongoing registry, which is a multinational, multi-center registry, is a dedicated registry. The primary endpoint is a target lesion failure, which is a composite of cardiac death, TV, target vessel myocardial infarction, and clinically indicated target lesion revascularization within 12 months. A lot of secondary endpoints. Now, this is a registry which is ongoing until June last year. 900 patients have already been enrolled, and I think I'm told that more than 1,000 patients have now been enrolled. But of course, the enrollment is a little slow because of the COVID pandemic. Then the stent is also being evaluated in a randomized fashion with with the everolimus eluting stent. And one of the foremost study which is ongoing, which has already been started, is a randomized clinical trial of everoluminal DES plus sirolimus eluting stent versus everolimus eluting stent for percutaneous coronary intervention in patients with diabetes mellitus. This is called Ability Randomized Controlled Trial. The principal investigator is Antonio Colombo. Now, objective of this is to compare the angiographic and clinical performance of everoluminal DES plus versus everolimus eluting DES in patients with diabetes mellitus. It is a multi-center, single-blinded, randomized, investigator-initiated pilot clinical trial. It will be done in 7 Italian sites. Total of 165 patients will be enrolled, out of which 110 will be in the everoluminous DES plus group and 55 in the everolimus eluting group. That means 1:2 ratio. These are the primary and secondary points. I will not go into these details. Now, the same study has been expanded onto a world's Ability DM global randomized trial, where again this stent will be randomized against the everolimus eluting stent in diabetic patients, called the Ability DM global study. And this will be the world's largest randomized controlled trial in more than 5,000 patients. Screening and randomization is already started. And these are the secondary endpoints. I would skip for shortage of time. And some of the exclusion criteria, that patient in cardiogenic shock or undergoing primary percutaneous intervention for ST segment elevation myocardial infarction will not be enrolled, and patients with renal dysfunction will not be enrolled. These are the sites which have been selected for Ability DM global trial. There are sites, 78 sites in Europe, 9 sites in Asia, and then 3 sites in Australia and 5 sites in Latin America. So let's see the clinical performance. I call it a stent for all seasons. I have personal experience of using this stent in more than about 60 patients by now. And let me show you some of the very impressive features which I have come across. This is a calcific diffuse disease and extremely tortuous right coronary artery with bifurcation stenosis involving the PDA and PLV. 87 years, very old patient, female patient, recent onset angina class 4, with new onset left frontal point block, ejection fraction 55, and CAG showed severe calcific triple vessel disease. Look at the right coronary artery. So this is a kind of a partial Shepherd group, number one. Number two, highly calcified vessel. Number three, highly tortuous vessel. It is impossible to reach the distal site. There is a significant stenosis which involves throughout the length of the RCA, but also involving the origin of the PD, PLV, and extending onto both PD and PLV. So you can very well imagine that you are confronted with several problems in this patient. First of all, decalcification or making a platform where a stent can be introduced into such a tortuous vessel. So debulking with the help of rotablation, followed by placement of stents, and then lastly, doing a bifurcation at the distal RCA going into PD and PLV. So let's see, this was the rotablation. We use the Amplas guiding catheter, rotablation with a 1.25 millimeter burr, and then deployment of luminal DS plus in distal to mid RCA. These are long stents. I think these are 34 millimeter each, 34 and 44. This is the distal, this is the mid segment. We had no problem in negotiating these stents through such a tortuous vessel after plaque modifications using rotablation. Then we not only we deployed the stent very easily, but we also did a bifurcation stenting using a tap technique. You can see here the stent has been deployed in the main vessel up to the proximal part and also extending into PLV. And through this stent, we deployed another stent which was going into PD. And this is also a long stent using a tap technique. And this is a kissing balloon for the tap technique. And then the pot proximal to that. And finally, a proximal stent. This is again a 40 millimeter long stent from the osteoproximal part of the RCA. And this is the final result. So such a gratifying result, possibly it would have been difficult to get whatever expertise you may have without a good stent platform in your hand. So if I have to summarize the features of the stent, it is an extremely flexible and trackable stent which can be deployed successfully even in a highly tortuous and calcified vessel. Bifurcation stenting was possible using a luminal DES plus and can be performed easily because of the larger circular cell diameter. Now we go on to case number 2. This is a LMCA bifurcation stenting for long calcified stenosis involving LAD and LCX using SKS technique. This is a lady who is highly diabetic, insulin dependent. You can see a very diffusely diseased distal vessels, but also highly calcified left main involving the proximal part of the LAD and also the intermediate vessel circumflex is a relatively small vessel with a OM which is totally occluded. So we had no intention of treating the distal part of the LAD. We just wanted to treat the proximal part of the LAD and the ramus or the OM branch. And we prefer to do a rotablation in this patient also, both the LAD as well as the ramus. You can see here that how difficult it was to put even a burr across this highly stenotic lesion. Finally, we were able to cross both these vessels, and then we used the SKS technique. Now, this patient had LV dysfunction with ejection fraction of nearly 34%. So we did not want to prolong the procedure too much. She was a very sick patient. So we did a SKS technique using 2 abdominal DES plus 1 LAD and 1, and these are both long stents, and deployed them at the same time, then did a high pressure balloon dilatation. And then this is a final result. Good looking vessel with TIMI 3 flow. So 2 abdominal DES can be tracked and deployed through LMCA to LAD and LCX using SKS technique, even the highly calcified arteries. So this stent can be deployed in distal vessel traversing through a long, we have deployed one more stent in the distal vessel in this patient, which I did not show you, in the distal part of the LAD. And so this could be easily tracked through a long proximal abdominal stent without any difficulty. A last case is in a long instant restenosis in right coronary artery, where we again wanted to use a different drug. And this is a sirolimus eluting abdominal plus. Now, this is a moderate to high grade stenosis, which is long, right from the proximal part to the distal part of the RCA, with areas which are very significant in-stent restenosis, you can see here. So it's a long in-stent restenosis in a previously deployed everolimus eluting stent. So we first did a rota in this patient also, using a 1.25 millimeter burr and then 1.5 millimeter burr, and then used two everolimus stent, and this is the final result. We expanded the stent almost 0.75 millimeter. We deployed first 3 millimeter, 2.75 millimeter stent and expanded them with the 3 millimeter balloon and went beyond the 22 atmosphere. So it could easily be 3.1 or so. So nice result, which is possibly would give you a long-term durability procedure. So deployment of abdominal DES for treatment of long diffuse ISR provides a viable option for prevention of future recurrent stenosis because of its unique coating technology and a reliable anti-proliferative drug, which is sirolimus. Lastly, in acute myocardial infarction, abdominal DES for anterior wall STEMI. So this is a STEMI with anterior wall. You can see here that this is after the thrombosuction. There is a big septal. We did not want to lose this septal at any cost, so we have wired this septal also. Distally, it is possibly a diffuse disease vessel. So we wired the LAD and then deployed a long abluminous DES from the origin of the LAD. You can see here. And we saved the septal also. And almost a TIMI 3 flow could be achieved. So 6 months of follow-up has been done in this patient. There is no recurrence of angina. There is improvement in LVEF from 35 to 50%. He was seen recently and is awaiting 9 months of angiographic follow-up. So in conclusion, abdominal DES plus provides an excellent angiographic result without any recoil or foreshortening in STEMI. No incidence of acute or subacute stent thrombosis in our small experience. So friends, I conclude my talk by showing you a highly, encouraging photograph, which shows that the innovators of this stent, which is the Anvisian technology, has been awarded the National Award for 2018 from the Honorable President for successful commercialization of abdominal DES plus in diabetic patients. With that, I thank you very much.